If, when the user taps on a given material, we want a panel to be invoked to show the full data available for that material, we must first create the panel. Here we show it after creation, although it's empty. And then we indicate, at the level of the work widths grid, that the default action for when we select a line, that is, when we tap on it, is invoking this panel. To do that, we create a new event already associated with the default action. We will call it View Material. We go to the Events tab, and here we will program the invocation to the new panel, which must receive the material by parameter because its purpose is to show us information. What material? The contents of the collection variable corresponding to the item that was selected at the time, the material ID element. In the View SD Material panel, we must declare the input parameter. With material ID being in character 18, it corresponded to the key of the material business object in the SAP. Here we put the same variable to show the possible warning or error messages we had in the panel that listed the materials. In this case, we must call another method of the same material business object of the ERP. We must import it. Tools, Application Integration, SAP BAPI Import. And then we connect. And we search for the material business object again. And this time, we choose the getDetail method. As opposed to the case of getList, this is an instance method and not a class method. Therefore, to use it in GeneXus, we must necessarily invoke it through a variable of the data type, the SAP material object, and not directly. We will see this further ahead. The method has these 8 parameters, where the first 4 correspond to the output. If we wanted, we could test the method as we did with the getList before. In 2 parameters, it will return the information on the material. One of them, number 7, will correspond to the material's general information, and the other, number 5, will correspond to the material's cost data. Let's import the method without testing it. As we did before, we select it, together with the selection of the getList as well, and then we import. In the output window, we can see that the SAP material object is imported again, as well as the getList function and the new one, getDetail, together with the structured data types necessary for the parameters, which we can see in the View folder. These are the new ones. When we open the SAP material object, we view them as types of some of the parameters in the new method. These are the 2 output parameters that will contain the material's relevant information. The material's general data, such as description, type, industry sector, division, and so on. And also data on the cost of the material, such as the price. We will not want to show all this information on our panel, but only a part of it. Therefore, we created 2 types of structured data: material general, representing a subgroup of the information of the first SDT, and material valuation, which shows the information on the second one. We've added material ID to both in case we want to indicate what material the information refers to. What we will do then is define 2 variables with those data types on the View SD material panel, which will show the information on the material received by parameter. In the layout, we insert a tab control in order to have 2 tabs, one for the general information and the other for the valuation information. And we eliminate the third tab. In the first one, we insert the structured variable material general with all its elements. And in the second one, the structured variable material valuation without the ID material. And we change all variables to read-only. As we did in the case of the work with, in the refresh event, we will have to call a procedure, which we will have to create, and name it SAP Material Get Detail, that will invoke the corresponding BAPI through RFC and will return these two variables loaded. To this procedure, we will have to pass by input parameter the material identifier and also the variables we have just inserted in the layout, which will return the loaded material general and material valuation. It will also return the collection of warning and error messages that will be managed in the same way we did before. Here we show the procedure after it's been created. And if we go to the parameter declaration, in the source, we can see that in order to avoid having to repeat the same code of connection to the SAP ERP every time, we've encapsulated it in another procedure with two output parameters. One variable SAP Session Manager of the GX Enterprise Session Manager object type, and a variable messages that will have the connection error loaded in case it occurs. Consequently, we've also changed the code of the procedure that we already had to now call the connection procedure. So, after connecting to the ERP, we must invoke the getDetail method. Since, as we know, this is an instance method and not a class method, we will not be able to write directly. Instead, we will have to create a variable of the SAP material data type. And we indicate the material identifier that will be loaded in this instance. It'll be the one received by parameter material ID. Then we can invoke the getDetail method. Again, we will create variables for all parameters, dragging the SDTs from the view folder, and using the same name for the sake of clarity. And we will define variables for the parameters of the simple types. Now we invoke the method, passing all its parameters, which are empty. If the return code is empty, then the execution has been successful. If it's not empty, then we add an item to the collection of messages in the same way as we did before with the list of materials. When the execution has been successful, all we need to do then is to load the output variables according to the method's two output parameters. And we are now ready for testing. We right-click and run on the main object. To complete the implementation of the work with of materials, all we need to do is to program the possibility of modifying or deleting a material. To do this, we define the tap events for each control. And once there, we invoke the appropriate method of the SAP material external object. We must previously import it from the ERP, as we've done so far with the getList and getDetail methods. We will leave this implementation pending so you can do your own research and find out how to do it. In the next video, following the addition of the client work with, which is totally analogous to the one for materials, we will see how to implement an input menu for the user to choose the work with to be used each time. That menu will later include an option that will be to work with the sales orders.